Keep your ghetto spawn away from civilized children before they spread their diseases. Officer Derek Whitman's venomous words cut across Riverside Park as he sneers at Keisha Washington, who's sitting peacefully on a bench watching her 8-year-old daughter Amara play. The playground falls silent. Other parents freeze, shocked by the officer's blatant cruelty. Keisha slowly stands, her voice steady but firm. "I'm sorry. What did you just say about my child?" "You heard me, welfare queen." Whitman steps closer, his face twisted with disgust. "Now pack up your little criminal and—" The slap comes without warning. Keisha's head snaps to the side, the sound echoing like a gunshot across the park. Children scream, parents pull out phones, frantically recording. Amara drops from the swing, sobbing as she runs toward her mother, but Keisha doesn't cry. She slowly turns back, touching her burning cheek with unnaturally calm fingers, studying Whitman's badge number like she's memorizing evidence. Have you ever watched someone make a mistake that would destroy their entire career? 3 hours earlier, Keisha Washington had been just another single mother navigating her Saturday routine. She'd dropped Amara off at soccer practice, grabbed coffee from the corner bodega where Mrs. Carter always asked about her government work, and settled onto her usual bench at Riverside Park with a clear view of the playground. To any observer, she looked like countless other parents, tired but attentive, scrolling through her phone while keeping one eye on the children. But there were subtle differences that only a trained eye might notice. The way she positioned herself with her back to a tree, clear sight lines in all directions. How she checked her phone not for social media or texts, but for what appeared to be work notifications marked priority and field update. "Agent Washington, are you still coming to Marcus's graduation party next weekend?" Her former colleague Janet had called just as Amara's soccer practice ended. "Just Keisha now," she'd corrected quickly, glancing around to make sure no one had overheard. "And yes, I'll be there if this assignment wraps up." "Assignment? Girl, I thought you were taking time off for—" "I'll call you later, Janet." Keisha had ended the call abruptly as Amara bounded over, grass stains on her jersey and excitement radiating from her 8-year-old frame. Now, sitting on that same bench where everything would soon change, Keisha watched her daughter claim the highest swing. This park had become their sanctuary over the past 3 weeks. Not just because Amara loved the new playground equipment, but because Keisha's current work required her to observe this specific location during peak family hours. She'd been documenting patterns, the way Officer Whitman and his partner Rodriguez conducted their patrols, how they interacted with different families, the complaints that had been filed and mysteriously dismissed about aggressive enforcement targeting Black and Latino families specifically. Mrs. Rodriguez, an elderly woman who brought her grandson here daily, had approached Keisha the week before. "They told Miguel he couldn't play on the big kid equipment," she'd whispered, glancing around nervously. "Said it was for appropriate families only." When I asked what that meant, the tall officer, the mean one, he just stared at me until we left. Keisha had listened, made mental notes, and added another entry to her growing file. 3 weeks of documentation, witness statements, video evidence. A pattern of behavior that violated federal civil rights laws. Her phone buzzed with another work message. Status update needed. Timeline for field observations? She typed back carefully. Ongoing surveillance. Multiple incidents documented. Recommend continuing current position. The response came quickly. Understood. Maintain cover. Report any escalation immediately. Escalation. The word made her stomach tighten. She'd seen enough cases to know that officers like Whitman rarely stayed at the level of verbal intimidation. Sooner or later, someone would push back. And when they did... "Mama, watch this," Amara called out, pumping her legs to swing higher. "I'm watching, baby." "You're flying." But Keisha was watching more than her daughter. She was cataloging the way other families unconsciously shifted when the patrol car made its rounds. How the Hernandez family had stopped coming after what Mrs. Rodriguez described as a very unpleasant encounter.
Bye.
How the teenage boys shooting hoops had learned to scatter the moment they spotted Whitman's uniform. This community was being systematically intimidated, and the formal complaints were disappearing into bureaucratic black holes, which was exactly why federal oversight existed. Why agents like her spent weeks blending into communities, documenting what local authorities preferred to ignore. Her phone rang. Amara's school principal. Miss Washington? I hate to bother you on the weekend, but we've had some concerns about Amara's recent behavior. She's been asking a lot of questions about police officers, whether they're good guys or bad guys. Some of her drawings have been concerning. Keisha closed her eyes. Even at 8, Amara was absorbing the tension that surrounded them, the knowledge that their safe spaces weren't actually safe. I'll talk to her, Mrs. Patterson. Thank you for calling. Is everything okay at home? If there's something we should know, everything's fine. Just some grown-up worries she's picking up on. But nothing was fine. Not when families had to calculate which playgrounds were safe. Not when children learned to read officer moods before they could read chapter books. Not when a federal agent had to work undercover to document what should have been obvious to any supervisor with eyes. The patrol car rounded the corner, right on schedule. Keisha straightened, her pulse quickening with the familiar surge of adrenaline that came before any operation. She didn't know that in 10 minutes, everything would change, that her carefully maintained cover would be blown in the most violent way possible. She only knew that justice sometimes required witnesses, and today, she was perfectly positioned to witness everything. The patrol car pulls up with deliberate slowness, tires crunching on the gravel path that winds through Riverside Park. Officer Derek Whitman emerges first, his massive frame casting a long shadow across the playground. His partner, Officer Maria Rodriguez, follows more hesitantly, her expression already showing the discomfort that will haunt her testimony months later. Keisha watches them approach, her trained eye immediately cataloging details. Whitman's aggressive posture, the way he scans the diverse families like a predator selecting prey. Rodriguez's reluctance, staying a half step behind, her hand unconsciously resting on her radio rather than her weapon. "Mama," Amara calls from the swings. "Why did those police officers look at you like that?" "Like what, baby?" "Like you did something bad." From the mouth of an 8-year-old comes the truth that adults spend careers trying to document. Even children can recognize the weight of unjust scrutiny. Whitman stops directly in front of Keisha's bench, close enough that she has to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. The positioning is intentional, a power play designed to intimidate. What he doesn't know is that federal agents are trained to recognize and counter exactly these psychological tactics. "Afternoon, ma'am." His voice carries the false politeness that precedes cruelty. "We've had some complaints about loitering in this area." Keisha's response is measured, professional. "What specific complaints, officer?" She glances at his name tag, already knowing what she'll find. Officer Whitman. The fact that she reads his name seems to irritate him. Most people avoid eye contact, avoid personalizing these encounters. Her directness throws him off his practiced script. "Complaints about people who don't belong here make other families uncomfortable." "I see. And what makes you think I don't belong here?" It's a simple question, but it cuts straight to the heart of his assumptions. Around the playground, other parents are starting to take notice. Mrs. Carter from the bodega pulls out her phone, already sensing something wrong. A jogger slows her pace, circling back to stay within earshot. Rodriguez shifts uncomfortably. "Derek, maybe we should—" "I got this, Maria." Whitman's voice sharpens. He leans closer to Keisha, invading her personal space. "Look, lady, I don't know what game you're playing, but you need to pack up your kid and move along before this becomes a problem." "What kind of problem?" The question hangs in the air like a challenge. Keisha remains perfectly still on the bench, her posture relaxed but alert. She's not backing down, not showing the fear he's accustomed to seeing. The kind where Child Protective Services gets involved, Whitman snarls, his mask of professionalism finally slipping. The kind where we start asking questions about supervision and appropriate environments for children. The threat hits like a physical blow. Around the playground, parents exchange horrified glances. Someone threatens to take your child away, and every parent in earshot feels their own vulnerability. But Keisha's training kicks in. Document everything. Stay calm. Let him reveal his true nature. Are you threatening to make a false report to CPS because I asked you to explain your complaint? False? Whitman's voice rises. Lady, look around you. Look at how you're dressed, where you're sitting, the kind of influence you're exposing that kid to. Real parents don't need the police to explain. Keep your ghetto spawn away from civilized children before they spread their diseases. The words explode across the playground like shrapnel. Every conversation stops. Children pause mid-play, sensing the adult tension without understanding its source. Amara's swing slows as she turns toward her mother, confusion written across her young face. Keisha stands slowly, every movement controlled. I'm sorry. What did you just say about my child? You heard me, welfare queen. Whitman steps closer, his face twisted with a hatred that's been festering for years. Now pack up your little criminal and get out before I— Before you what, officer? Her voice cuts through his rage like ice water. Something in her tone, the complete absence of fear, the clinical precision of someone documenting evidence, should have warned him, should have made him step back, reassess, remember his training. Instead, he leans forward until his face is inches from hers. Before you learn what happens to people who don't know their place. Rodriguez takes a step forward. Derek, that's enough. We should— Stay out of this, Maria. This one needs to understand. The slap comes without warning. Whitman's hand connects with Keisha's cheek with a crack that echoes across the entire park. The force of it snaps her head to the side, leaving an immediate red handprint across her dark skin. Around the playground, chaos erupts. Children scream, parents shout. Mrs. Carter's phone captures everything from 15 feet away. The jogger is already dialing 911, though she's not sure who to call when the police are the ones committing the crime. Mama! Amara's terrified voice cuts through the noise as she abandons the swing, running toward her mother with tears streaming down her face. But it's Keisha's reaction that will haunt everyone who witnesses it. She doesn't cry. She doesn't shout. She doesn't even rub her burning cheek. Instead, she slowly turns back to face Whitman, her movements deliberate and calm. Officer Derek Whitman, badge number 4127. She says quietly, her voice carrying across the now silent playground. Chicago Police Department, District 18. There's something chilling about the way she catalogs the information, like she's collecting evidence, like she knows exactly what she's doing. Whitman, high on adrenaline and righteous rage, doesn't recognize the danger. That's right, sweetheart. Remember that name when you're filling out your welfare applications. Rodriguez grabs his arm. Derek, we need to go. Now. Not until she understands. I understand perfectly, Keisha interrupts, pulling Amara close while maintaining eye contact with Whitman. I understand that you just committed assault and battery against a civilian in front of multiple witnesses while in uniform, representing the Chicago Police Department. Her legal precision should be a red flag. The way she frames the incident in exact statutory language, the calm recitation of facts while her daughter sobs against her side. But Whitman is too far gone, too intoxicated by the power he believes he holds. Assault? He laughs, a harsh sound that makes several children start crying. Lady, that was barely a love tap. You want to see what real police work looks like? Derek! Rodriguez's voice cracks like a whip. We're leaving. Right now. Around them, phones are recording from every angle. Parents are shepherding their children away from the confrontation, but not before capturing video that will change everything. Mrs. Hernandez, who'd stopped coming to this park weeks ago, happened to be walking by and caught the entire exchange from the sidewalk. But it's Keisha's response that transforms this from a simple case of police brutality into something much more significant. As she holds her traumatized daughter, as she faces down a uniformed officer who just assaulted her in broad daylight, her voice remains steady and professional. "Officer Rodriguez," she says, addressing the partner directly, "I need you to know that this entire incident has been witnessed, recorded, and will be reported through appropriate channels." Something about the phrase appropriate channels makes Rodriguez's blood run cold. It's not the language of an angry civilian. It's the language of someone who knows exactly which forms to file, which departments to contact, which laws have been violated. Whitman, oblivious to the warning signs, sneers one final time. "Report it to whoever you want, princess. Nobody cares what people like you have to say." As the officers finally retreat to their patrol car, as the crowd of witnesses begins to disperse, as Amara's sobs gradually quiet against her mother's shoulder, one question hangs in the air. Who exactly is Keisha Washington, and why does she seem so unnaturally prepared for what just happened? The answer will reshape everything. But first, the system has to run its predictable course. Within an hour, the videos are everywhere. Mrs. Carter's footage, shaky but clear, shows the entire confrontation from start to finish. The jogger's phone captured the slap from a different angle, the sound even more shocking when isolated from background noise. Most damning of all is the security camera mounted on the park's maintenance building, its wide-angle lens documenting everything with bureaucratic precision. But the official story being typed into the Chicago Police Department's incident management system tells a very different tale. The subject appeared agitated and confrontational upon initial contact, Officer Whitman dictates to his partner as they sit in their patrol car 3 blocks from Riverside Park. Female, approximately 30 to 35, exhibited signs of possible substance abuse or mental disturbance. Rodriguez's fingers hover over the keyboard, her stomach churning. "Derek, that's not what—" "Are you questioning my report, Officer Rodriguez?" The weight of seniority, of departmental politics, of career survival presses down on her shoulders. She continues typing. The subject became increasingly hostile when asked to comply with reasonable requests to relocate. When the officer attempted to de-escalate the situation, the subject made threatening gestures toward uniformed personnel. The lies flow easily now, each sentence moving them further from the truth and deeper into a system designed to protect itself. "No mention of physical contact," Whitman adds. The subject was never touched by officers. Any claims to the contrary represent false accusations intended to discredit law enforcement. Meanwhile, back at the park, Keisha sits on the same bench where everything changed, holding Amara close as her daughter's tears finally begin to subside. Other parents approach hesitantly, offering support, sharing their own stories of encounters with Whitman. "He made my son empty his pockets last month," whispers Mr. Johnson, a black father whose 10-year-old son had been playing basketball. "Said he looked suspicious shooting hoops alone. My family stopped coming here after he told us this park wasn't for our kind," adds Mrs. Vasquez, her voice shaking with remembered humiliation. Each story adds another layer to the pattern Keisha has been documenting. But now she's no longer just an observer. She's become part of the evidence. Her phone buzzes with a text from her sister. "Girl, you're all over Facebook. Are you okay? Do you need me to come get Amara?" Another message from Janet. "Saw the video." "Holy shit, Keisha. What's your plan?" And then one that makes her blood run cold from an unknown number. "Maybe next time you'll know your place, bitch." She deletes that one immediately, but not before screenshotting it for her files. "Mama," Amara says quietly, "why did that policeman hit you?" The question every parent dreads: how to explain institutional racism and abuse of power to a child who still believes the world makes sense. Sometimes, baby, people with power use it the wrong way. But there are other people whose job it is to fix that when it happens. Are you going to tell him? Keisha strokes her daughter's hair, choosing her words carefully. I'm going to make sure what happened today doesn't happen to other families. What Amara doesn't know is that her mother has already sent 3 text messages that will set federal wheels in motion. The first to her direct supervisor, cover blown. The incident escalated to assault. Request immediate consultation. The second to the FBI's Civil Rights Division. Federal agent assaulted by subject under investigation. Video evidence secured. Moving to Phase 2. The third to a secure number that connects directly to the Department of Justice. Pattern confirmed. Ready to proceed with formal charges. By evening, local news stations are running the story. Channel 7's report leads with Mrs. Carter's video, the slap playing in slow motion while the anchor's voice provides context. A disturbing incident at Riverside Park has raised new questions about police conduct in Chicago's South Side communities. The segment interviews several witnesses, their faces blurred for protection. It was completely unprovoked, one voice states. She was just sitting there with her daughter. I've never seen anything so cruel. But the most telling moment comes when they reach out to the Chicago Police Department for comment. The spokesperson's response is textbook deflection. We are aware of allegations circulating on social media regarding an incident in Riverside Park. The department takes all complaints seriously and will conduct a thorough internal review of any claims of misconduct. What they don't mention is that Officer Whitman's report makes no reference to physical contact. According to official records, nothing inappropriate happened at all. The disconnect between video evidence and police narrative creates exactly the kind of federal case that Keisha has spent 3 weeks building. But now it's personal in a way that makes her both more determined and more vulnerable. As she tucks Amara into bed that night, her daughter asks one more question. Mama, are you scared of that policeman? Keisha considers her answer carefully. The truth is complicated. She's not afraid of Derek Whitman. She has resources and authority he can't imagine. But she is afraid of what this means for every other black mother who sits on park benches, who takes their children to playgrounds, who exists in public spaces while being seen as threats rather than human beings. No, baby. I'm not scared of him, but I am going to make sure he learns that his behavior has consequences. Outside, a car drives slowly past their apartment. Probably nothing. Possibly surveillance. In 12 hours, everything will change again. But for now, Keisha Washington allows herself to be simply a mother, comforting her traumatized child. Tomorrow, she'll remind the world that she's much more than that. The call comes at 7:47 a.m., interrupting Chicago Police Commander Patricia Hayes' first cup of coffee and what should have been a quiet Monday morning review of weekend incidents. Commander Hayes? This is Deputy Director Sarah Mitchell from the FBI's Chicago Field Office. I need to discuss the Riverside Park incident from yesterday. Hayes pulls up the report on her screen, Whitman's sanitized version still glowing in neat, bureaucratic paragraphs. I'm not sure what federal interest there might be in a minor neighborhood dispute. Deputy Director. Ma'am, I need you to pull the personnel file for Officer Derek Whitman immediately. And I need the original incident report, not the amended version that's currently in your system. The words hit Hayes like ice water. Amended version? She had approved Whitman's report herself, noting how cleanly it avoided any problematic details. Now the FBI is suggesting there are multiple versions. I'm not sure I understand. Commander, the civilian who was assaulted in your officer's report? Her name is Special Agent Keisha Washington. She's been conducting federal civil rights surveillance in your district for 3 weeks under deep cover. The phone slips from Hayes' hand, clattering against her desk. Around her, the precinct continues its normal Monday morning rhythm, officers filing reports, phones ringing, the coffee machine gurgling in the break room. but her world has just tilted completely off its axis. She retrieves the phone with shaking hands. "I'm sorry, could you repeat that?" "Special Agent Washington was embedded in your community documenting patterns of discriminatory enforcement. What your officer did yesterday, assaulting a federal agent in the line of duty while violating the civil rights of local residents, that's now a federal crime with mandatory prosecution guidelines." Hayes's mind races through the implications. A federal agent, assaulted by one of her officers, while conducting official federal business. The video that's been circulating on social media isn't just evidence of police brutality, it's documentation of multiple federal crimes. "Deputy Director, if there's been some misunderstanding..." "There's no misunderstanding, Commander. Agent Washington has been building a comprehensive case documenting systematic civil rights violations in your district. Officer Whitman's assault yesterday was recorded from multiple angles, including Agent Washington's own surveillance equipment." The room seems to spin. Hayes pulls up the viral video on her computer, watching it with new eyes. The woman she'd dismissed as just another complainer, another civilian making trouble for her officers, is a federal agent. The calm, professional way she handled the assault, the precise language she used afterward, it all makes terrible sense now. "How long has she been?" 3 weeks, Commander. 3 weeks of documented incidents, witness interviews, pattern analysis. Your department has been under federal investigation, and yesterday, your officer provided us with the kind of evidence that makes cases unwinnable for defendants. Meanwhile, 6 blocks away in the FBI's Chicago field office, Special Agent Keisha Washington sits across from Deputy Director Mitchell, her left cheek still bearing the faint bruise from Whitman's assault. Gone is the casual park mother persona. Her dark suit is crisp, her bearing unmistakably professional, her voice carrying the authority that Derek Whitman never suspected lay beneath her carefully constructed cover. "Ma'am, I recommend we move to Phase 2 immediately," Keisha reports, sliding a thick file across the conference table. "The assault yesterday, combined with the evidence I've collected over the past 3 weeks, gives us everything we need for federal civil rights charges." Mitchell opens the file, revealing photographs, transcripts, video evidence, witness statements, a comprehensive case that transforms isolated incidents into a pattern of systematic abuse. "Walk me through what you documented before yesterday's incident." Keisha's presentation is meticulous, professional, and devastating. 17 separate incidents of discriminatory enforcement. 12 families were forced to leave public spaces without cause. 8 children were subjected to inappropriate questioning and searches. Multiple false reports filed to justify unconstitutional behavior. She clicks through photographs on her laptop. Officer Whitman targeted the Rodriguez family for loitering while they watched their grandson play. The Hernandez children ordered off playground equipment deemed inappropriate for their type. Mr. Johnson's 10-year-old son was forced to empty his pockets while shooting basketball alone. Each image, each incident report, each witness statement builds an undeniable case of systematic civil rights violations. But it's the final video that changes everything. Yesterday's assault, captured from Keisha's own recording device with crystal clear audio and video. "Agent Washington," Mitchell says quietly, "you understand this changes your role in this investigation completely." "Yes, ma'am. I'm no longer just the investigating officer. I'm also the victim of a federal crime." Back at the police station, Commander Hayes is making the phone call that will end Derek Whitman's career. He answers on the 3rd ring, his voice still swaggering with yesterday's confidence. "Whitman here, Whitman." "Officer, I need you to report to my office immediately. Bring your partner." "Is this about that incident yesterday?" "Because I filed a complete report, and Rodriguez can verify." "Whitman, just get here. Now." 20 minutes later, Derek Whitman swaggers into Hayes' office with the casual arrogance of someone who believes he's untouchable. Maria Rodriguez follows, her face pale with apprehension that proves more justified than she knows. "Sir, if this is about yesterday, I want to reiterate that the subject was completely non-compliant and potentially dangerous." "Shut up, Derek." Hayes's voice cuts through his prepared justifications. "The woman you assaulted yesterday is a federal agent." The color drains from Whitman's face. Rodriguez actually gasps, her hand flying to cover her mouth. "That's impossible. She was just some welfare mom with Special Agent Keisha Washington, FBI Civil Rights Division. She's been conducting federal surveillance of discriminatory policing practices in our district for 3 weeks. And yesterday, you provided her with evidence that will destroy both your career and potentially this entire department." The silence stretches like a held breath. Outside Hayes's office, the normal sounds of the precinct continue. Phones ringing, reports being filed, officers discussing weekend arrests. But inside this room, everything has stopped. Rodriguez finds her voice first. "Commander, when Derek filed his report, I tried to tell him—" "You filed a false report about assaulting a federal agent," Hayes interrupts. "Both of you are suspended pending federal investigation. The FBI will be here within the hour to begin interviews." Whitman finally speaks, his voice smaller than anyone has ever heard it. "Federal investigation?" "Congratulations, Officer Whitman. You just became the poster boy for everything that's wrong with American policing. The woman you called a welfare queen has been documenting systematic civil rights violations for the Department of Justice. And thanks to yesterday's performance, she now has enough evidence to bring federal charges not just against you, but potentially against everyone who enabled this pattern of behavior." As the two officers stumble from the office, Whitman in shock, Rodriguez in tears. Hayes contemplates the wreckage of what should have been a routine Monday morning. Special Agent Keisha Washington hasn't just been underestimated. She's been systematically building the case that will transform how this community experiences law enforcement. And Derek Whitman just handed her everything she needed to win. The FBI's Chicago field office transforms into a war room within hours of the revelation. Conference Room B, normally used for routine briefings, now houses the kind of federal investigation that makes headlines and ends careers. The walls are covered with photographs, timelines, incident reports, and witness statements. 3 weeks of systematic documentation that tells a story of institutional failure. Special Agent Keisha Washington stands before a projection screen, her professional demeanor a stark contrast to the vulnerable mother Derek Whitman had so catastrophically underestimated just 24 hours earlier. Her left cheek still bears the faint bruise from his assault, but her voice carries the unmistakable authority of federal law enforcement. "The pattern is undeniable," she addresses the assembled team of FBI agents, Department of Justice attorneys, and federal prosecutors. 17 documented incidents of discriminatory enforcement, 43 civil rights violations, multiple false reports filed to justify unconstitutional behavior. She clicks to the next slide, a photograph of Whitman towering over the Rodriguez family, his finger pointed accusingly at their 7-year-old grandson. This image was taken on August 15th. The family was ordered to leave the playground because their child was allegedly too disruptive for other families. The park was nearly empty at the time. Deputy Director Mitchell, who has overseen dozens of federal civil rights investigations, shakes her head in disgust. "The brazenness is remarkable. It's like he believed he was completely untouchable." "That's exactly what he believed, ma'am," Keisha responds. "And based on the department's response patterns, he had good reason for that confidence. Every complaint against Officer Whitman has been dismissed, buried, or redirected into administrative limbo." The next slide shows a timeline of complaints, dozens of them stretching back 3 years. Each one filed by Black or Latino residents. Each one ultimately classified as unfounded or resolved through counseling. "Agent Washington," asks federal prosecutor Janet Kim, "walk us through the assault itself, from your perspective as both investigating officer and victim." Keisha's expression tightens slightly. Even for a trained federal agent, reliving the moment when professional duty collided with personal violation isn't easy. "Officer Whitman approached my position at 2:47 p.m. His initial contact was textbook intimidation, false complaints about loitering. threats regarding Child Protective Services, escalating verbal abuse designed to provoke a reaction that would justify arrest. She pauses the video at the moment just before the slap. At this point, I had documented sufficient evidence for federal charges, but I maintained my cover because his behavior was escalating beyond anything I'd previously witnessed. Did you consider revealing your identity to de-escalate? No, ma'am. First, my cover was crucial to the ongoing investigation. Second, federal agents shouldn't need to identify themselves to receive constitutional protection from assault by local police. Third, the moment Whitman targeted my daughter with his rhetoric, this became personal in a way that transcended professional objectives. The video resumes, showing the slap in slow motion. Around the conference table, even seasoned investigators wince at the sound of palm meeting cheek at the sight of a uniformed officer striking an unarmed civilian. The assault occurred at 2:51 p.m., Keisha continues, her voice steady despite the personal nature of the evidence. Multiple witnesses, multiple recording devices, multiple angles of documentation. Officer Whitman then proceeded to make statements that demonstrated both his awareness of the criminal nature of his actions and his confidence that there would be no consequences. What statements specifically? That's what happens when welfare queens don't know their place. Remember that name when you're filling out your welfare applications? Report it to whoever you want, princess. Nobody cares what people like you have to say. Each quoted phrase lands like a physical blow in the quiet conference room. These aren't the words of an officer having a bad day. They're the statements of someone expressing deeply held beliefs about racial hierarchy and police impunity. Agent Washington, Deputy Director Mitchell asks, what was your daughter's reaction to witnessing the assault? For the first time, Keisha's professional composure cracks slightly. Amara is 8 years old. She ran from the playground crying, asking me why the policeman hit her mommy. She's been having nightmares. She asks if police officers are good guys or bad guys now, and I don't have a simple answer for her. The human cost of Whitman's actions settles over the room like a weight. This isn't just about civil rights violations or federal crimes. It's about a child's sense of safety being shattered by the very people supposed to protect her. Meanwhile, in interview room 3 down the hall, Derek Whitman sits across from FBI Special Agent Marcus Carter and DOJ Attorney Sarah Rodriguez. The swagger and confidence that defined yesterday's encounter have evaporated, replaced by the hollow-eyed realization of someone whose world has collapsed overnight. Officer Whitman, Agent Carter begins, you understand that you have the right to have an attorney present during this interview? I don't need a lawyer. I didn't do anything wrong. The denial would be pathetic if it weren't so dangerous. Even now, faced with video evidence and federal charges, Whitman clings to his distorted version of reality. Let's review the incident at Riverside Park yesterday, Attorney Rodriguez says, sliding a photograph across the table. Do you recognize this woman? Whitman glances at Keisha's FBI identification photo, his face cycling through confusion, recognition, and something approaching panic. That can't be right. That can't be. Special Agent Keisha Washington, FBI Civil Rights Division. 13 years of federal service. Currently assigned to investigate discriminatory policing practices in Chicago's South Side communities. But she looked like... Like what, Officer Whitman? The question hangs in the air. Everyone in the room knows what he's thinking, what his assumptions were based on, what led him to believe that this black woman sitting peacefully in a public park deserved verbal abuse and physical assault. I want to see the video again, Whitman says suddenly. They play it for him. All 4 angles. Mrs. Carter's phone recording, the jogger's footage, the park security camera, and most damaging of all, Keisha's own surveillance device. Each perspective shows the same sequence, unprovoked aggression escalating to criminal assault. Officer Whitman, Agent Carter says as the video ends, you understand that assaulting a federal agent in the performance of their duties is a federal crime punishable by up to 8 years in prison. But I didn't know she was... Didn't know she was what? A human being deserving of constitutional protection? The badge doesn't give you the right to assault civilians, officer. That's not what I meant. What did you mean when you called her a welfare queen? What did you mean when you told her to know her place? What did you mean when you said nobody cares what people like her have to say? Each question strips away another layer of Whitman's attempted justifications, exposing the ugly core of assumptions that drove his actions. In the observation room next door, Commander Hayes watches through one-way glass as her officer's career dies in real time. She's joined by Police Superintendent Robert Martinez, whose presence signals the department-wide implications of this catastrophe. "How bad is this, Patricia?" Martinez asks. "Catastrophic. The FBI has documentation going back 3 weeks. Multiple incidents, multiple victims, multiple violations. And now they have video evidence of one of our officers assaulting a federal agent." "What's our exposure?" Hayes turns from the window, her expression grim. "Sir, if the federal investigation finds systematic civil rights violations enabled by departmental policy or culture, we're looking at a consent decree, federal oversight of our entire operation, complete restructuring of training, hiring, and disciplinary procedures. And Whitman? Whitman is finished. Federal prison, civil liability, criminal conviction. But the real question is whether this stops with him or spreads to everyone who enabled his behavior." Back in the interview room, the interrogation continues with methodical precision. Each question, each piece of evidence, each moment of video builds an unassailable case against not just Whitman's actions, but the attitudes that informed them. "Officer Whitman," Attorney Rodriguez asks, "do you believe that Special Agent Washington deserved to be assaulted because of her race?" "No." "Of course not." "Then explain your actions. Explain your words. Explain why a black woman sitting peacefully in a public park represented such a threat that physical violence was justified." The silence stretches for long minutes. Whitman's breathing is labored, his face flushed with the effort of trying to construct an explanation that doesn't exist. Finally he speaks, his voice barely above a whisper. I thought she was just another." "Another what?" "Another complaint that would go away." The admission hangs in the air like a confession. Not just to the assault, but to the systematic pattern of abuse that made it feel routine. The belief that black residents exist at the mercy of police discretion, that their constitutional rights are conditional, that complaints against officers like him disappear into administrative black holes. "Officer Whitman," Agent Carter says, leaning forward across the table, "yesterday you assaulted a federal agent who was documenting your pattern of civil rights violations. Today, you're going to help us understand how many other victims there have been and who in your department made it possible." The investigation that began with Keisha Washington watching her daughter play in a park is about to expose the institutional rot that made Derek Whitman possible. And for the first time in his career, he's going to face real consequences for actions he never imagined would be challenged. 6 weeks later, the federal courthouse in downtown Chicago buzzes with the kind of media attention that transforms local incidents into national conversations about justice and accountability. Outside, protesters hold signs reading "Justice for Keisha" and "End Police Impunity," while news vans line the street with satellite dishes pointed skyward like prayers for truth. Inside courtroom 1847, Derek Whitman sits at the defendant's table wearing the ill-fitting suit of a man whose world has collapsed. Gone is the swagger, the uniform, the authority that once made families scatter from playgrounds. In its place sits a hollow shell facing federal charges that carry a mandatory minimum sentence. Federal Judge Patricia Morrison reviews the plea agreement with the clinical precision that has defined her 20-year career. "Mr. Whitman, you understand that by pleading guilty to federal civil rights violations under 18 U.S.C. Section 242, you are admitting to willfully depriving Special Agent Washington of her constitutional rights while acting under color of law." "Yes, Your Honor." His voice is barely audible. And you understand that this plea agreement includes your cooperation with ongoing federal investigations into systemic civil rights violations within the Chicago Police Department? Yes, Your Honor. In the gallery, Keisha Washington sits in the front row, her FBI credentials clearly visible on her lapel. Beside her, Amara fidgets in her best dress, still too young to fully understand the proceedings, but old enough to recognize that the man who hit her mother is being held accountable. Judge Morrison continues reading the terms that will reshape Whitman's life. 18 months federal imprisonment, 3 years supervised release, mandatory civil rights training, prohibition from law enforcement employment, and payment of restitution to the victim and affected community members. But the individual sentence is only the beginning of the reckoning. Furthermore, Judge Morrison states, this court notes that the defendant's actions have triggered a comprehensive federal investigation resulting in significant institutional reforms within the Chicago Police Department. The reforms are unprecedented in scope. A federal consent decree now governs CPD operations, mandating external oversight of hiring, training, and disciplinary procedures. Every officer must complete 40 hours of civil rights and de-escalation training. Body cameras are mandatory for all civilian interactions. Community oversight boards have been established with real authority to investigate complaints. Most significantly, the administrative limbo that buried previous complaints has been replaced with a federal reporting system that tracks patterns of abuse across individual officers and entire precincts. Assistant U.S. Attorney Janet Kim addresses the court. Your Honor, this case represents more than one officer's criminal conduct. The evidence shows a systematic pattern of discriminatory enforcement that violated the constitutional rights of an entire community. Today's conviction sends a clear message that federal law enforcement will not tolerate such violations, regardless of the perpetrator's uniform or authority. Commander Patricia Hayes, sitting in the second row, knows her own career hangs in the balance. The federal investigation discovered dozens of complaints against Whitman that were dismissed, buried, or ignored. Her signature appears on many of the administrative decisions that enabled his pattern of abuse. She'll testify next week in the civil rights lawsuit filed on behalf of 17 families who suffered harassment, intimidation, and constitutional violations. The settlement negotiations are already approaching 8 figures, money that could have funded community programs instead of paying for institutional failure. Officer Maria Rodriguez, Whitman's former partner, has agreed to cooperate fully with federal investigators. Her testimony about departmental culture, about the pressure to support fellow officers regardless of their conduct, about the informal code that prioritized loyalty over accountability, has become crucial evidence in the broader institutional case. The impact on the community cannot be overstated, continues Attorney Kim. Families stopped using public parks. Children developed fear of police officers. Parents taught their kids to avoid spaces that should have been safe. The defendant didn't just violate Special Agent Washington's rights, he terrorized an entire neighborhood. As the judge prepares to impose sentence, she addresses Whitman directly. Mr. Whitman, your actions on August 23rd revealed a fundamental misunderstanding of your role as a police officer. You are not an occupying force in these communities. You are not entitled to treat citizens differently based on their race or perceived economic status. You took an oath to protect and serve all residents equally, and you violated that oath in the most egregious manner possible. The gavel falls with finality that echoes through the courtroom and ripples across a community that has waited too long for justice. Outside the courthouse, Keisha Washington addresses the assembled media with the same calm authority she displayed on that park bench 6 weeks ago. But now the world knows who she really is, what she represents, and why her composed reaction to assault contained such power. Today's conviction represents accountability, she says, holding Amara's hand as cameras capture the moment. But accountability is just the first step. Real change requires sustained commitment to reform, to training, to treating every resident of this city with dignity and respect. A reporter calls out, Agent Washington, what would you say to other communities experiencing similar problems with law enforcement? Her answer carries the weight of federal authority and personal experience. Document everything. Know your rights. And remember that the system works when people demand that it work. Sometimes justice requires patience, but it also requires witnesses who refuse to stay silent. The institutional changes triggered by one officer's catastrophic misjudgment will reshape policing in Chicago for decades to come. 1 year later, Riverside Park looks exactly the same, but feels completely different. The playground equipment gleams in the afternoon sun, children's laughter echoes across the green spaces, and families of every background spread blankets on the grass without fear or hesitation. Keisha Washington sits on the same bench where everything changed, watching Amara navigate the monkey bars with the fearless confidence that childhood should always possess. The bruise on her cheek has long since faded, but the changes it sparked continue to reshape this community and countless others across the nation. "Mama, look," Amara calls out, hanging upside down from the parallel bars. "I'm not scared anymore." The simple statement carries profound meaning. Not scared of playgrounds, not scared of police officers, not being scared that being black in public spaces makes her a target for harassment, or worse. Officer Maria Rodriguez approaches the bench, her uniform replaced by the casual clothes of someone who chose a different career path. She'd resigned from the force 6 months ago, unable to reconcile her oath to protect and serve with the institutional culture she'd witnessed. "Agent Washington? I hope it's okay that I'm here. I just wanted to see. Please call me Keisha." And yes, it's good to see positive change. They sit together in comfortable silence, watching children play without the specter of discriminatory enforcement hanging over their families. The new community policing initiatives have transformed these interactions. Officers now participate in community events, know residents by name, understand that their job is to serve rather than control. Rodriguez speaks quietly. "The training programs you helped design, they're working." New recruits spend 2 weeks in community immersion before they ever put on a badge. They learn names, stories, backgrounds. They understand that every person they encounter is someone's child, someone's parent, someone's neighbor. The federal consent decree governing Chicago police operations has become a model for other cities. Mandatory body cameras, civilian oversight boards, federal monitoring of complaint patterns, reforms that once seemed impossible are now standard practice. "What about Derek?" Rodriguez asks. "He'll be released next month." Mandated community service, continued supervision, prohibition from law enforcement. He's required to speak at police academies about the consequences of constitutional violations. It's not revenge, it's accountability. The kind of systematic response that prevents future Derek Whitmans from believing they can assault citizens without consequences. Keisha's phone buzzes with a message from Deputy Director Mitchell. "Phoenix PD requesting consultation on discriminatory policing patterns. 3-week embedded investigation. Interested?" She looks at Amara, now teaching a younger child how to navigate the climbing structure, then at Rodriguez, who's considering law school to become a civil rights attorney. "The work continues," Keisha says, showing Rodriguez the message. "Are you going?" "Probably." Communities like this one exist everywhere. Families who deserve to feel safe in public spaces. Children who should grow up believing that justice actually works. As the afternoon sun begins to set over Riverside Park, Keisha reflects on how one moment of calculated cruelty exposed a system-wide failure and sparked changes that will protect thousands of families for generations to come. Sometimes justice moves slowly. Sometimes it requires federal agents sitting on park benches, documenting violations, building cases that transform institutions. Sometimes it takes a single black mother refusing to be invisible, refusing to accept that constitutional rights are conditional. Have you ever witnessed injustice and wondered if speaking up would matter? Keisha's story proves that our voices, our videos, our witness testimony can be the evidence that changes everything. What would you have done in that park that day? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story moved you, Hit that like button and subscribe to Black Soul Stories for more stories about justice, accountability, and the power of ordinary people to demand extraordinary change. Because sometimes the system works exactly as it should when we force it to.